And it's really funny because there is in fact a science to doing them. And you wouldn't think there would be, but last week I kind of tripped up a little bit and I broke a couple of rules. All right. And so if you saw the title or the invite for this training, it was I did a webinar last week and got 8 new clients. It should have been 30. That's actually absolutely true. And I'm going to share to you today why that was, what I should have done, and then how you can do the same with whatever you're doing. Okay. So first of all, I want to start real quick with the actual replay page. So this is the replay. Okay. This is where people went and signed up. Okay. We were pitching a specific offer on this. Now we have more than one offer, but we were pitching this specific offer. If I hit play here, let's go ahead. And so we had over 64, 5 people, something like that, right? There's pages of these people showing up, right? So it was, for all intents and purposes, it was a really successful webinar. But normally when I have a webinar that has this kind of people, this level of people, this amount of people, I should say, I should have gotten a 20% conversion on the call by itself. So I should have gotten 12 immediately after the call, after the webinar. And then through the replay, I should have gotten another 12. I should have gotten 24 to 30, right around that range. But in this case, I made one really big error that kept me from hitting that result. And so today I'm going to walk you through how webinars work. I will show you the error that I made. And I knew I was making it right when it happened, but I didn't have any time to fix it. And, hey, this happens. So we're going to go ahead and go over to my whole value. Again, if you guys have, if you were on my training last week, this is how I think, right? I like to use these boards. This is the training from last week, just kind of goes all over the place. Same thing with some of this stuff. Anyway, so I like to use these boards just to like macro things, like say, hey, here's the thing. This is what it needs. Okay. And then I start like almost puzzling it together after I'm like throwing the big pieces out. So if it's not a fleshed out keynote presentation where it's slide by slide by slide, sorry, but that's not how I do it. Okay. Anyway, so I guess there's a story arc here to webinars, and I'll show you how it works. By the way, if you have any questions, grab the chat feature, and I'll answer those questions at different points during the training. Okay. But there's different reasons why you would use a webinar. But the number one reason is because instead of selling one at a time, you can sell one to many, right? I mean, 8 clients isn't terrible, which by the way, of those 8 clients, one has already ascended into a high ticket client. So we more than, it was well worth it. But it's a lot better than selling one at a time. If you can close 20, 30, 40 people with one 1-hour presentation, you'd be crazy not to do it, right? And it's not the only thing that you do, but it's one of the things that's in your toolbox of sales and marketing. Okay. I want to start out with a generalization of what the whole purpose and what we're doing when we do a webinar. So the idea of a webinar is the same idea of a movie, right? If you have read the book, the tale of, what is it? The Hero's 2 Journey, right? The Hero's 2 Journey introduces a story arc, a framework, right? Where you have the character. The character encounters a problem. That problem spins off the plot. That plot goes through a process and then resolves itself. And through that whole story arc, the character at the beginning goes through a story, but they end up being a new version, a newer, improved version of themselves. Okay. So if you understand how a really good movie works, you understand how webinars work. All right. Now, in the case of a webinar, at the end, we're trying to sell something and make some money. All right. And so there's different ingredients that this recipe is going to have to include in order for us to be able to achieve the result of making sales at the end. Okay. And it breaks down into these three categories. All right. Hook, story, transition, offer. All right. Hook, story, transition, offer. Hook, you have to have a reason for them. Like you have to have a promise and a reason for them to stick around. Okay. And we'll talk about that here in a second. The story is you have to deliver something of value. Now, what you consider value and the method of delivery of value in a webinar, they're a little bit different. There is nuance to how it works. And then transition is when you set up the hook in the story, it's done in such a way to where you are definitely not selling anything. You're conveying ideas and you're proving your points and you're showing them a new solution to an old problem, right? And at some point, it's naturally going to set in. Okay, well, you've showed us all this neat story. You've set this thing up. You've given us enough proof to where we're like, what next? Well, without a proper transition, you won't be able to go into a pitch. Okay, so there is a step that's very critical in doing a webinar that requires that you do a very systemized, and it's fast. It's like 2 minutes, but you have to do it. If you don't do it, then you will lose. Okay. And then the last part is obviously the offer. Okay. Now, each one of these hook, story, transition, offer, each one of these, I could spend hours and hours and hours just on one thing. So the goal here is to go over, hit the goals of each part. And then you can take this and you can make your own notes. You can decide, what is my hook? Why will this work? Why wouldn't this work? What is my story, right? What supports my idea here? And so on and so forth. Okay. So hopefully that's the overview about what we're going to cover, and you guys can see how this works. So let's go ahead and hone in first on the hook. All right. So at its core, a hook is the thing that got the person to opt in, and it's the reason they want to stay until the end. All right. So that's going to rely on you doing a couple of things perfectly. All right. And I do mean perfectly, because right here, if you do this particular step perfectly, the rest of the webinar becomes simple. Okay. And that all starts off with a unique promise. Now, when you're first doing business marketing, when you're first marketing, like the very first thing you do, you start reading books like this, and there's nothing wrong with books like this, but the actual utility, the way a professional does things is a little bit different than a novice, right? The way you word it, that's what everybody says is the most important thing. That's not the case. The idea that you convey is the only thing that matters. Meaning, here's a unique promise. We're focusing on the promise right now. Here's a unique promise. Do you care? Right? If it's how to get this result with this thing in less time, like, all those headline frameworks work, chances are it's not going to work because there's other people offering the same thing. That's like the first grade level. A unique promise is something that when your prospect sees it, it's so specific to them that they're like, I need to know more about this. I was just looking today at a real estate funnel, like a company, no, not real estate, a mortgage funnel. I did mortgages for 7 years. So I was looking at somebody that had a mortgage funnel, and they had this big promise. And their promise was, we're going to give you a certain amount of leads guaranteed in this time frame. Now, that's a unique promise in a way, right? But that really is just the surface. You're just scratching the surface on what a unique promise actually is. If I look at that exact same promise from the standpoint of the loan officer on the other side of the screen, I'm like, this is the same thing everybody else says. Everybody promises me leads. They all guarantee it. They all this, they all that, they all whatever. And by the way, their guarantee is the same guarantee. It's all conditional. So I'm going on to the next. Now, instead, a unique promise, it would go to the same result. But if you found yourself in a marketplace where you had so much competition, you only have one solution. And that's to go down deeper, to niche down deeper. All right. So to stay in the same line of thought with that loan officer funnel, I would probably find out, well, maybe I should find out where my top markets are. So am I Dallas, Los Angeles, whatever? I'm going to start there. And then I'm going to find out what the conditions are. Like, what is a nichier thing? Like, can I focus on, like in Dallas, maybe I've got a lot of more military people. Can I focus on a result for a VA loan? Or maybe I'm in, what's a good place for investing right now? North Carolina, South Carolina, right? If I'm in a place where the conditions are such where people are more attuned to that particular result, get non-owner occupied loans, 100% down. I don't know any of the terms anymore. I'm just throwing this out there, right? I want to niche down even further. And I want to peel apart these different promises and make mine unique as possible. Okay. And I'm spending a little bit more time on the promise here because unless you have the right promise, nothing else matters. Nothing else is going to work. If you have a very generic promise, it's going to be a very generic outcome. Okay. It's not going to work. Okay. So that's number one. Hopefully you're getting the idea on what the promise is. Okay. Once you've established what the promise is, your very first goal. Now, Russell calls it setting up the domino, right? Setting up the domino. And the whole idea of setting up the domino is like, if I'm able to push this one idea over, then everything else I say after that will just happen by default. It will just happen. Okay. That's a very vague or maybe metaphorical way to think about what the domino, like what we do here. I like the way that Chad taught it to me. And in every one of his webinars, he always has a slide that introduces the domino in this way. Your problem is not the problem. Okay. And I'll give you an example. I've done a lot, obviously, in the medical marketing space. And commonly when doctors look at presenting to helping people with their problems, as a doctor, they're taking in a lot of information in the form of symptoms. Describe to me your symptoms. Okay. Well, what is a symptom? A symptom is a clue as to some type of problem upstream from the symptom. Okay. So in the case where it's like, let's see here. Let's say, I'm trying to think of a good, I have all these doctor situations in my head. Let's say in the case of yellow teeth. Okay. This is a good example. In the case of yellow teeth being your problem, well, if they're so bad, he'll give you a special kind of toothpaste to fix that. But it might be all of the coffee that you drink in the morning that's dyeing your teeth, right? So the problem is not your domino, is flipping the actual problem, the situation, flipping it around, saying, listen, you're looking at your problem of not getting more VA leads, of not getting more loans, of not getting whatever. You're looking at it the same way everyone else is. You have to look at it this way, right? And this one thing, your problem is not the problem. The actual problem is this. That thing that you're pointing to, that's the actual problem. That's the point that you have to prove in the story. All right. It's a very important step. Something you can't skip over, and it's something you probably need to spend most of your time thinking. A lot of people, some of the tactics that people will use at the problem is not the problem is metaphors. Okay. They'll say, whatever, they'll set up some kind of metaphor where just to simplify it, right? Sometimes people take it, it's hard for them to buy into complicated ideas. So a metaphor is a simple way of delivering that information. Other times it's the beginning of your story. It's part of your story. Okay. People's DNA is engineered to learn via stories. If you've ever heard facts tell, stories sell, that's the whole idea. Like if you can encapsulate this in a story, you win. Okay. Then the next thing, credibility. You want to introduce yourself, and that's what we're doing here is credibility, but really, why should they listen to you? Okay. You've introduced a unique problem. You've introduced an idea, but they want to know who you are and why you're in front of them. You don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but you have to introduce why you're credible and to speak about this. Okay. And then 4 is B plus C equals I. The most important part, I shouldn't say the most important, one of the critical pieces of your opening 10 minutes is to hook that person until the end. And the formula to do that is B plus C equals I. Benefit plus curiosity equals interest. Okay. Benefit plus curiosity equals interest. And if you look over to the story, there's 1, 2, 3. We encapsulate, and I'll show you some of my webinar here in a second. We encapsulate these B plus C equals I. We say, hey, problem, why, why the number one problem in real estate has yet to be discovered. It's totally bad, but it's like you want to focus on the problem, but introduce an idea, right? Benefit plus curiosity equals interest. So you're going to reveal to them something that they can benefit from. You're not going to tell them everything. You're going to open a loop. You're going to focus on what, not how, and that's going to hook them with interest. Now, the danger of doing these types of presentations is that some of the ideas are too principle-based and too vague when they do it. So I want you to visualize movies, stories, things that you've experienced yourself that you can relate back to this, right? B plus C equals I. When have you heard somebody use a phrase where you're like, hey, if you want to get the best body ever and do it with less effort, I'm going to show you how to do that in the next 30 minutes, right? So less effort, some curiosity, benefit is an awesome body. And then the fact that I didn't give them the answer. If I said, if you want to get an awesome body in less time with a ketogenic diet, listen, then they're going to be like, oh, it's a ketogenic diet. They leave. Okay. So I understand that some of these things are a little bit concepts, but just bear with me. These things kind of build on themselves. All right. The story phase. Now, if you've ever seen a webinar, mine is no different. We'll go ahead and go to my promise to you, harsh reality. Hold on. I introduce this right. Maybe I jumped over it. You can all see this here in a second, by the way, of course. Well, at any rate, when we get into the problem discovery solution, we're going to introduce the problem, right? We're going to say the number one thing that's keeping you from getting rid of your knee pain, even if you've been told you must have knee surgery, right? And so the problem of the story is you sharing an actual story. Again, everything looping back to the problem, not the problem. Now, what I liked about the way that Chad taught me this is he basically said, everything is problem, discovery, solution. And if you think about your life, whenever you've gone and you've learned anything, it goes through that phase, problem, discovery, solution, right? This was no different for me in any business that I have. I remember when I started running my agency, I kind of got pushed in. I was a business consultant, and I kind of got pushed into lead generation a little bit by chance. And I started running campaigns and I started getting leads. And as soon as the leads started coming, I was really excited about that. It was like, it's like, man, I'm good at this. This is easy. And I'm getting leads and I'm feeling great about it. But as soon as that starts happening, immediately my clients start coming back and they're like, hey, you know, this lead quality is bad, or I can't get a hold of anybody, or, you know, people come in, but they're not interested, blah, blah, blah. Like all of these problems start happening. Okay. And if you're an agency or if you've been in business, that's where we all start. Okay. We all try something and then we're like, oh, I guess this wasn't as easy as I thought. And so that's where you start. And that's where your story starts too. Okay. So if I was to use this exact same story arc, just off the cuff, if I was to want to prove the point that, hey, qualified Facebook leads are the key thing that you need. And if you have qualified Facebook leads, you win, right? I would start out with saying, hey, the problem is you start out here and your offers are very generic. And yes, they generate leads, but leads aren't patients or leads aren't clients, whatever it is. Okay. And so I looked at this problem, and for a long time, it perplexed me. It really did. It made me think, well, maybe I'm just terrible at what I do, or maybe this doesn't work, or maybe there's no way to do this. But I look around and I see other people who they're having success with it. Why them? Why not me? And so that's where the problem phase goes. And then we go into discovery. And discovery is like, okay, how did I go from that point where I decided not to give up to this is how I figured things out? So for me, and this is very, very important, I started out generating chiropractic leads. And as I was going and generating leads for chiropractors, I noticed a lot of parts of that puzzle where, you know, clients were terrible at calling their leads. I noticed a lot of that stuff. But I also noticed that the quality of the responses were not great. Like, meaning it was like people were definitely just in it for the deal, and they didn't necessarily, their engagement, their intent was not quite the same. And I started thinking to myself, how can I fix that? And then one day I had a client say, hey, we're going to start offering regenerative therapies. And can you do a campaign for that? I'm like, sure, I can do that. And so I didn't necessarily know how to do it. I looked around, I wrote an ad, I put it up there, and boom, all of a sudden we started getting a lot of leads. But something different happened that time. And what was different was people were more excited. People were definitely more engaged, and the lead quality was through the roof. And I thought to myself, whoa, what happened? I'm running Facebook ads. I'm doing like the similar style of ads. I'm like, everything is the same for me. What has changed? And it was all about who and what problem I was solving. The problem that I had been solving at the beginning of my journey was very broad and general. So I got very broad and general responses. As soon as I started to niche down into potentially perceivably unsolvable problems like knee pain, the only solution for knee pain, you know, is really surgery. That's what the public thinks. Well, what if I could fix your knee permanently without surgery? What would that do for you? And the implications for somebody who has knee pain is everything. It's like, I wouldn't have to get surgery. I wouldn't have to potentially get surgery again. I wouldn't have to have failed surgery. I wouldn't have to run the risk of infection. There's so many reasons why, right? So all of a sudden, Because I'm solving a bigger, more niche problem, the responses are more qualified and more valuable all of a sudden. By niching down, I can really focus on a better result. So that's the discovery that I went on. So that's step 2. And then the solution is, so what I decided to do was build up an entire library of only niche specific campaigns. I would focus on chronic pain and on chronic symptoms like neuropathy, knee pain, disc pain, allergies, like these things that had this high problem value, because when I solve those problems, I get a higher compensation on the back. Win-win. And my solution was then to focus on a niche specific only. If it doesn't speak to a condition, it doesn't work. Okay, I can't cite chronic pain without it having a name, right? And so your story arc, and that's an absolutely true story arc for me, right? And it just so happens that if I was delivering a webinar, I would pull each part of that story into their separate parts. Problem, discovery, solution. Okay. Now I told you that story in 5 minutes or something like that, and that would not work for a webinar. Okay. In order for you to really execute the story phase, the discovery part of this, you have to follow this framework. Problem, then you prove it. Is that a problem? You can't just say it's a problem. You have to prove it. Okay. Discovery, prove it. Proof that the discovery that you went through is actually true, whether that's with a metaphor, a story, a demonstration, a piece of data, a testimonial, whatever it is. There's different types of proof. Solution, proof, 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 proof. Okay. Gary Bencivenga said 95% of selling is having a unique promise and proof to back it up. Okay. So all of these copywriting tricks and all that kind of stuff, while they should be in your toolbox, the idea of what you do in your business is all about solving a unique problem and proving that you can do it. All right. All right. I don't even know where we're at as far as time, but we're trucking along here. Let's keep going. Transition. So after you've set up the problem, after you've taken them through this journey and you've really shown them a new way of looking at their problem, before you can't just start selling them. Okay. Because what it will do is it will erase all that hard work that you did. All right. So you have to have a pivot point. You have to have a transition. It doesn't take long. It's not hard to do, but it's a critical thing before you move on to your quote pitch, your offer. Okay. That is one. Recap. Okay. So Clayton Makepeace, who was a copywriter, said, tell people what you're going to tell them what you told them, or tell people what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. Right. And so as we go through a story, there's going to be a lot of detail. People are going to follow along, but they're going to miss a lot of details. So at the end, when they don't have to be convinced anymore of the story, you just got to go back. So let's recap. We learned today that the biggest problem is going to generic. We learned that focusing on niches is the best way to go. And we learned that these niche specific templates that we have here are the only thing you need to start getting more revenue coming into your practice. That's the recap. Okay. You just go bam, bam, bam. That's what we learned. Okay. Once you've done it, you pause. And then you say, you have a slide and it says, has this been valuable so far? And then people are cued to engagement. By the way, inciting engagement through your webinar is one of the key things. You got to say, have you guys seen problems like this? You guys know what I'm talking about? What have you want to ask questions like that throughout the entire thing. But at this transition point, it's really, 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 really important. In fact, you can't move on without it. Okay. So has this been valuable so far? Here's what I would say. All right, guys. So I'm going to slow down here for just a minute. I want you to grab the chat feature in the bottom. It's the green button. Pull that up. I'm going to ask you a question. Okay. Get ready to type. Has this been valuable so far? And they're gonna be like, yes, it's been valuable. Okay, good. As soon as I get the first yes or whatever, then I'm like, okay, I start saying it like everybody's saying, okay, good. We've got yeses coming in. Great. Fantastic. All right. The next thing I want to know is we have a program that can help you with this, but I don't want to sell you any of it unless you want me to tell you how it works. Would you like me to tell you about it? Then yes, tell us about it. Tell us about it. We remove the sell. By asking their permission to sell them, like, hey, I don't want to just sell you any of this unless you want to know, I'll answer any questions or whatever. I don't want to sell you anything. I don't want to tell you how we help people solve this problem unless you want to know about it. And then people go, yeah, tell us all about it, right? And so then once they give you the okay, they say, okay, yeah, Randy wants to know about, Seth wants to know about, Mary wants, okay, great. Guys, let's go ahead and I'm going to walk you through how we deliver this result for people. Okay. And this is where I messed up big time. I did everything else fine. I'm not going to lie. When I put together the webinar the other day, I was extremely rushed for time. I thought completely wrong. I planned in accordingly. Anyway, this is where I really went wrong. So the simple pitch, okay, this is where I want to focus on, I want to give you this. I want to give you all these things. Some people call it a value ladder. There are specific ways to go about like showing them what they're going to get and then removing all of their all the obstacles. Like saying, for example, for UpHex, I would say, I'm going to give you a click and go ad launching platform. And then I'd put a line over, which means you don't ever have to go in and manually set up a Facebook campaign ever again. I'll save you time and I'll save you a lot of money, right? Boom. That's one thing. So I'd go through and I'd simplify the pitch and then I would like get them excited about all that kind of stuff. And then in there, I would layer in elements of proof, right? So I did that actually last week. I was going through, I thought I did it last week. Maybe I deleted it. Anyway, oh, this is one I don't think I've taught yet. That's why. Okay. But an element of proof is I had a screenshot of somebody who's now offering our DIY offer to their clients. And that client was showing his results on a video screen. And this guy was talking all about it. This is an amazing thing. Like, well, that proof proves my thing. So I'm going to put that as my proof, right? So proof, again, proof is its own thing. If you don't have proof, there's different ways to facilitate delivering your ideas with believability and credibility. And one of those things would definitely be demonstration. Like demonstration is probably the number one easiest form of proof that you can use. Okay. So that's proof. And then value. So a lot has been said about value, but if you guys know this book right here, normally I've known of Alex Hormozi for a long time. I live in Boise, Idaho, so ClickFunnels headquarters is like a mile that way. But I really like his book, and he's got this value equation here. Alex, if you watch this on replay, hold on. Whoop. I love this thing. Okay. It's really good. The whole idea is assuming you have a really good pulse on somebody's dream outcome, which that's where we started. Okay. So we definitely should know this. You can convey to them, or like in their brain, they believe that the likelihood of them getting that result is very high. And then time to get the result is like, if it's fast, and then effort to get it. If you can accomplish all those things, your value goes through the roof, right? And you get paid in accordance to the problems you solve. All right. So value, the way you do your value is there's a lot of things, but you want to focus on those things: dream outcome, likelihood of achievement, time to get there, and ease, right? What can you put in your slide deck, in your webinar to maximize your value? Okay. Now, and I have that all listed down here, by the way. Now, this is the one where I really messed up. I really, really messed up there. In the case of this webinar, my normal everyday price is $497 a month, and it's a $497 and it's $1,000 setup fee, right? In this case, I chopped the setup fee, or they don't pay it's $297 a month, so that's a great deal. But they get the first month of their service for free, and then they get a discounted onboarding fee. So the actual monetary part of it was a good offer. But the problem is I had been putting this webinar together, and it basically got ready. I thought it basically became ready. I finished it 10 minutes before the webinar, which was so stupid. But we got a lot of stuff going. I didn't get to it in time. And honestly, I have given a webinar to these people before. And by the way, the last time I did, I got like 35 people from the webinar. But this time I only got 8 because I missed this one key component. At the end, I didn't do any urgency or scarcity, and I knew it. When I got to the end, I'm like, oh no, there's no slide that puts a fast acting bonus. For the next 10 people that sign up, I'm going to give a personal one-on-one call. I'm going to set you up. I'm going to make sure that you understand. I'm going to answer any of your questions, but that's just to the next 10 people. So if you're sitting on the fence, you're not going to get it. Like, that would be an example, right? I would have some type of fast acting bonus to make them take action right there. Okay. I would reverse the risk in that same thing. I'd say, listen, and for whatever reason, if you decide this is not for you, I have a 100% satisfaction guarantee. If this is not what you thought it was, you don't pay. Because guess what? They don't pay anyway, right? If they're not going to stick around, they're not going to pay. So that's not a guarantee that should scare you. All right. Urgency, scarcity. I did not put any of it in my webinar. I deleted the slides and I went to the pitch and I said, here's the price. Here's what you get. And then at the very bottom, it was like, offer available until Monday. I think that was, I don't know what day, 15th or something. Offer available until January 14th. And that's all I had. And I was like, oh, I know I did this wrong. I know I did this wrong. It was a good webinar. The whole story arc, everything was good. The transition was good. The offer was good. The value was good. Then I missed the urgency and the scarcity. And what's interesting about that is no sales happened that day. No sales happened that day, but people were reaching out to me directly, asking me questions. Well, what about this? They were acting like they had all the time in the world to make the decision. And quite frankly, they did. They were right. I was wrong. And that's a mistake I will never make on a webinar ever again. But the funny thing is the offer expired on Monday, and right on cue, 8 people signed up. Sunday night, boom, done. The most important metric, if you've gone through that entire thing, and by the way, I killed my conversion rate because the amount of time that went by between my webinar and that particular point that I killed myself. So I'll go ahead and take any questions. I will say, I use webinars all the time, from time to time. It's been a key to my success. One webinar got me like 50 some users one time. Everybody, when I go into a webinar, I always try and reverse engineer my profit, meaning I can't sell somebody on a webinar. You can't sell somebody a $5,000 thing and have them buy it. It's not going to work, right? There are some rules around it, but I can always start them off on an easier offer, like an irresistible, stupid, they'd be dumb not to take it offer. And then through my execution, I can ascend them to more high ticket offerings. So I'll go ahead, and if you have any questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.